0%. Chapter 1, June 23, 2015, 3:20 a.m. Max woke up in complete darkness and tried to locate the sound that had torn him out of sleep. The faint glow of the small smartphone screen on the nightstand and the intrusive buzzing immediately caught his attention before he had even managed to understand what was happening. Yeah? Hello, is this Max Wayne? Yeah, that's me. Who's calling? Captain Brian O'Neill, Police Department. Max, we need you to come in immediately. Captain, it's the middle of the night. I'm asleep. Why on earth would I drive anywhere right now? What's going on? Max tried to make sense of what was being asked of him, but his thoughts refused to line up at this hour, and he wasn't inclined to agree to some vague request. It's extremely urgent. I've sent 2 officers to pick you up. They'll be at your place in about 2 minutes. Be ready. What is this about, Captain? I don't understand. Am I being accused of something? Get ready. You'll get all the explanations here. The phone went silent, showing the call had ended. Max got out of bed and, trying to gather himself, started pulling on his pants. Someone knocked on the front door, quiet but persistent. Max tugged on a t-shirt, shoved his phone and keys into his pockets, cast a quick glance at his sleeping wife and went to answer. Good night. Max Wayne, is someone going to explain what's actually going on? Max repeated the simplest question, this time aloud, facing the 2 officers at his door. You don't have any children who'd be left unattended? We have orders to bring you in. Urgently, please get in the car. One of them pointed toward the patrol car parked in front of the house. No, why? Am I under arrest? Max asked, just in case. Even though the officers weren't treating him like a detainee, they looked tense. Their hands rested on their belts, close to their service pistols, and they kept casting uneasy glances at the house and yard. You're not under arrest, but we do have orders to take you to the station. Right now. The second officer, silent until then, was starting to lose his composure. There was no point resisting, so Max followed them to the car. But the strangeness of the situation, the officers' restlessness, their tension, the fact that they clearly hadn't come to arrest him, all of it only deepened Max's confusion. The cops opened the back door of the battered Ford, closed it behind him, took their seats in the front and started the engine. The car pulled away, leaving behind 2 faint tire marks and a small cloud of exhaust that quickly dissolved into the night. June 23, 2015. 4 a.m. The police car sped along the empty streets. Fresh night air blew in through the slightly open windows. The men inside didn't speak. They'd been driving for about 20 minutes, long enough that they should have reached the nearest station by now. Sleep fell away like a hand. Max was wide awake and getting nervous. We're not going to the station? You were not ordered to be taken to the station. Then where are we going? That information is confidential. Don't worry, everything is fine. People don't usually drive me out to God knows where in the middle of the night without an explanation. Unfortunately, we do not know the reasons you are required to be at the location. Max lived with his wife in the suburbs, not terribly far out. On an empty road you could get downtown in about 20 minutes, but they had already been driving significantly longer. Passing the center and the nearer suburbs, the car was now almost at the edge of town. Fewer houses and shops lined the streets. More garages and industrial installations appeared. Max felt the patrol car's door handle he'd been gripping grow wet in his hand. At last the car turned onto another deserted street and stopped at the garage gates of a large concrete building. The building had no windows or visible entrance and looked like a massive concrete cube that, among the surrounding garages, parking lots, and workshops, nevertheless fit the area. As the patrol car pulled up, the gates opened and revealed a ramp leading down. The Ford drove through and entered a dimly lit parking area. There were quite a few unremarkable cars parked there, different makes, ordinary plates, but something about them caught Max's attention. In the low light he didn't notice at first. Then it hit him. Every single car was black. All of them. The Ford pulled up to a door. Let's go. Max didn't immediately realize the officer was addressing him. He stepped out and followed the cop up a stairwell. After climbing a couple flights of an unremarkable staircase, they entered the first door. The space beyond was a long gray corridor lit by white halogen lamps. A man was coming toward them. He looked about 40, maybe 45. He wore a strict, slightly old-fashioned black suit. His black tie was tied in a symmetrical knot and pulled snug to the collar. Good evening, Max. Come with me, please. Sergeant, thank you for your assistance. His voice and expression were calm, very calm given the tense situation. The cop who'd brought Max turned back, while Max followed the stranger deeper into the building. They walked for a long time. The corridor sometimes twisted and branched. Plain gray doors with card readers instead of handles or locks passed on both sides. Finally, they stopped at door number 46. The man swiped a card, and with a soft beep, the door opened. Max didn't miss the barely visible pistol grip tucked into his belt holster under the jacket. The room beyond the door was small and windowless. In the center stood a desk with a monitor, keyboard, and chair. Off to one side were 2 comfy armchairs and a low table, and another door could be seen in the far corner. A bright desk lamp lit the table, while a weak nightlight glowed above the armchairs. Several documents hung on the walls. The desk was buried under a mountain of papers. One stack buzzed unevenly, as if a printer or fax had once been buried beneath it. "Have a seat, Max." The man indicated one of the armchairs. "I'll pour some coffee. We're going to have a very long conversation." Max sat down. "Can you at least tell me what this is about?" "Certainly." The man fished 2 mugs out of the paper mess, set them on the table, and turned on a small electric kettle. "I'm an FBI detective. You are in our FBI facility housed in this large building. You were brought here by officers from the nearest police station on my direct orders." He poured coffee and sat at his desk. "We need you to give a statement in connection with an investigation. The case was placed under special supervision yesterday at 6 p.m. when a police detective referred it to the Bureau. I can't disclose the case details right now. I need to receive your answers untainted. But you can expect certain explanations later. I ask that you answer all my questions patiently, honestly, and as thoroughly as possible." Well, okay. Can I at least call my wife if this is going to take long? You won't be able to. Communication devices are blocked here. The interview will be long, but you'll be free afterward. For now, again, I need complete objective information. All right. Ask. Let's start at the beginning. How long have you known Lilith? Chapter 2. Lilith and Max had been living in perfect harmony for 9 years. Not once during those 9 years had they had a real fight. They had met on vacation at one of the city beaches. She had been lying alone on a sun lounger, sipping fresh juice when he approached her. They started talking about their childhoods, their studies, and their work. He worked as a manager in a construction company, handling logistics and optimization. After graduating from a mid-level university, Max first got a job as a credit department specialist, then as a service manager, and later as a logistician. He had not fully found himself in this work, nor in any other job. Yet he did not suffer over it either. He spent evenings walking on the beach, strolling through the streets, enjoying life. Lilith, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. A credit department employee, a careerist young and successful, she rarely went on vacation, preferring to surf the internet on weekends. However, that day it had been too stifling, and she decided to get some fresh air. Despite their different outlooks on life, they got along perfectly. That meeting on the beach had connected their lives. 2 years later, they bought a house together in the suburbs. It was a small, cozy home. Good neighbors, a green lawn, and a quiet family life. Another 2 years passed, and even the neighbors noticed the one detail missing in this idyll. "Were you unable to have children?" The detective interrupted Max's stream of thoughts. "Yes, that's right. We had tests done at a clinic, but the doctor said that Lilith could not get pregnant under any circumstances." "How did she react?" "She tried to control herself. She had several nervous breakdowns." "The 2001 reports indicate a police call to your address." "Yes." "It was a week after we got the clinic results. I then suggested having a child with another woman. She got drunk, we had a little quarrel, and in general she broke a window in the house, screamed for a long time, then the cops arrived, and she calmed down. That was the only time we ever fought." While Max spoke, the detective quickly wrote and scribbled notes in his documents. The detective pulled a folded, yellowed sheet from a thick cardboard folder, the same one he had been making notes in, and handed it to Max. "Is this the original document?" The document bore the emblem and information of Indianapolis Hospital. In the center, there were only 3 lines. Test subject Max Wayne, reproductive function 88%. Test subject Lilith Wayne, reproductive function 0%. Overall reproductive probability 0%. "Where did you get this?" Max felt a chill low in his stomach at this turn of events. "This is an extract from your record at Indianapolis Hospital, obtained by the detective from the station. I need to verify that this is accurate data." "Yes, it's the original, or at least a copy." "Exactly. And the doctor who issued this statement confirmed it and said errors were impossible." That's what we were told too. Please look at the next document. The detective handed over another paper, taking it directly from the fax machine. This is the birth certificate of Mary Wayne. Father, Max Wayne. Mother, Lilith Wayne. Yes, that's correct. Your wife gave birth to this child, Max? I sent an officer to the doctor who delivered your wife's baby. He'll confirm it if he remembers, of course. It was she who gave birth to Mary. How do you explain this, Mr. Wayne? It was a month after our quarrel in September 2001. Chapter 3. September 14th, 2001. Saturday, 9:35 a.m. Max was drinking coffee in the kitchen, watching the neighbor across the street water his lawn, occasionally dousing his son who ran away with a big, funny dog, laughing heartily. September had been hot that year, almost like the year he and Lilith met. Back then, they had been sunbathing and enjoying the beach well into October. His coffee was almost gone when a faint melody came from the living room. Max recognized Lilith's phone ringtone in the tune, walked over and picked it up. The display showed in large letters, Chris. Max answered, "Hi, Chris, how are you?" "Hi, Max, everything's fine. How are you guys?" She was a close friend of Lilith's. They didn't meet often. "All fine, Chris. Lilith is still asleep." "I'll tell her you called. Did you need something?" "Yes, it's important, Max. I know it's not very nice to interfere, and Lilith asked me not to spread it around. But she really needed to get it off her chest, you understand?" Max had trouble understanding a bunch of poorly connected questions without context, generated by Chris's mind. "I don't quite get what you mean." "Chris. About the children, Max. Sorry for sticking my nose in, but a friend told me she went through the same thing. I don't really like this conversation." "I understand, Max, but please listen for you and Lilith's sake." "All right, go ahead, finish." "So my friend talked about a lake in the mountains. It seems to be somewhere in Ohio. I can't say for sure, she only gave the directions verbally. Anyway, she managed to have a son after bathing there." "Chris, stop messing around. Don't start this topic again. The best clinic in the States gave 0%, zero. You understand? They usually leave 1 or 2% as a safety margin, but here it's 0. She just calmed down. It's not worth bringing this up again." "Max, she's not the first to try this. Someone told her about it too, you know." "Don't be a snob. I'm going to call her anyway and tell her. If she starts another hysterical episode or decides to end her life, it will be on your conscience, Christine." "So you'll just leave such a chance?" "Oh God, I'll call her myself. Bye." "Bye, Chris." The coffee had completely cooled, and Max began pouring a new cup. "Hi. Oh, hi, how did you sleep?" Sleepy Lilith came down into the kitchen. "Fine, can you pour me some too?" "Of course. Here you go. Who was on the phone?" "Chris called you." "Why at this hour?" "She didn't say." "Ask her yourself." "All right, shall we go to the store today? I spotted a new bedroom set." "Yes, of course. June 23rd, 2015. 6:31 a.m. So you actually went to that lake?" The detective leaned back in his chair and began studying me thoughtfully. "Of course. Can you really stop a woman in that situation? And did you try?" "Not really. I just didn't see much point in it." "What happened afterward?" "Nothing. She bathed, and we went on living as before." "Until 2004? "Yes, in February, Lilith found out she was pregnant." "I'm speechless, Mr. Wayne." "Me too. Did you tell your wife when you left that night?" "No, she was asleep." "That's very good, Max." "Why?" "Come with me, please." He stood and headed for the exit. Max had no choice but to follow. "Where did you get this dossier on us? Why were you collecting it?" "Those are good questions, Mr. Wayne, but I'm afraid you'll have to see the answers for yourself." He moved down the corridors toward the parking lot stairs, but to Max's surprise, continued further down. They walked for quite a while, 6 or 7 flights. "How many floors are there here?" "Believe me, that's the least of your concerns right now." They entered one of the doors. It was a large room with a high ceiling. In one wall, Max noticed a freight elevator with a stretcher. On the opposite wall were square metal hatches. Max immediately recognized the room as a morgue. "You see, Max, in May of this year, there was a series of powerful tremors along the San Andreas Fault, which caused partial erosion of the mountains along the entire east coast. In particular, there was a major landslide on a mountainous section. As a result of the landslide, the terrain changed drastically. Some protected lakes dried up. At the bottom of one of these lakes, tourists who came for camping discovered unidentified bodies. The state authorities conducted an examination, the results of which, along with part of the documents I received last night. How does this relate to me, detective? Research of this kind rarely yields results, because not everyone submits genetic code tests. But in this case, the examination did produce a result. The detective approached one of the hatches, opened it, and the shelf with the body began sliding forward. According to the genetic test report, one of the bodies found in the lake belongs to Lilith Wayne with 100% certainty. Everything is unreal. Everything started all of a sudden. Demonstrations in the streets, protests, tons of news pouring in from every corner of the internet, and there was no way to tell what was true and what was a lie. One thing I understood for sure. This had to be some kind of government operation, possibly a population purge. People were grabbing others right off the streets, breaking into their homes and taking them away to an unknown destination. These weren't isolated incidents. Reports were coming from every city. And then news started arriving from abroad. The authorities denied everything, promising to look into the situation, but it didn't help. The first reports of resistance groups and gunfire began to surface. They were breaking into family homes and could take anyone, the head of the household or a small child. The police were in no position to stop anything. Everything was happening far too quickly. 3 days passed, and that evening I was sitting in my room, watching through the window as a group of people walked down the street, shouting slogans and waving signs. I never liked any of these rallies, so I chose to stay home even though I felt uneasy. Thoughts of moving away crossed my mind, but I couldn't drop school and work, so I hoped for the best. 10 minutes later, I got tired of watching the protesters and went to bed. The morning was quiet, and I was relieved to wake up to the sound of my alarm rather than shouting outside. After breakfast, I looked out the window but saw only posters scattered across the ground. Apparently, the demonstrators decided not to clutter the place with extra trash. I got dressed and headed out, but immediately sensed something was wrong. The street was silent. No distant car noise, no birdsong, no sound at all. Luckily, I'd left early, so I walked along my street for a bit. Nothing had changed. Cars were lined up in rows. Shops glowed with their signs shimmering in the morning fog. But the people... A chill ran through me, and I headed to the intersection to wait for the bus. I didn't like driving through downtown and preferred public transit. However, as I approached the intersection, I slowed down. It looked as dead as my own street. No cars, no one at the bus stop. Only little swirls of dust drifting by now and then in the wind. A lump rose in my throat. What happened? I couldn't reconcile yesterday's crowds with today's emptiness. Had everyone left? Were they afraid of being taken? Oh, this was nonsense. I decided to grab some coffee and sort everything out. Work could wait. As I approached the coffee shop, I saw the door open, yet neither the barista nor any customers were inside. Empty. Take whatever you want. But I wasn't in the mood for jokes. I bolted out of the shop and sprinted home as fast as I could. I ran right down the road. There were absolutely no cars at all. When I got home, the first thing I decided to do was check the TV. I had my doubts, but maybe the government was broadcasting some kind of evacuation message. I turned on the TV and froze. The anchor was reading the news as if nothing had happened. World politics, the weather forecast. I started flipping through the channels. It was as if nothing had changed. Sports, an animal channel, some report, gardening. I looked out the window again and saw the empty street. None of this matched the life buzzing on the screen. I checked the date. It was today's. My head began to itch with tension. I understood nothing. What was going on? So many questions, not a single answer. And then it hit me, leave. Leave as far from here as possible. Maybe there were still people somewhere. Maybe while I slept there had been a sudden mass evacuation, some kind of disaster. The road to my parents' place was long, but it was better than staying alone in the middle of an entire city. I got in the car and drove along the empty streets, glancing around, hoping to see at least someone. No luck. Finally, I reached a rural road leading to the highway. I was driving almost in tears, losing hope with every passing minute. I was driving when suddenly, from behind a tree about 10 meters ahead, a small red flag appeared. I slammed the brakes and stopped sharply. The flag kept moving for a moment, and then an elderly man stepped out from behind the tree. Words couldn't describe my emotions. I never thought I'd be this happy to see a stranger. Brave of you. The man shook his head. Driving around, making noise. I looked at him questioningly. Right, you're not aware probably. Just like the rest of you. Have you seen anyone else? I asked. Yeah, a couple, the man sighed. They were in such a hurry they didn't even notice me. You're the first one who stopped. So what's actually happening? I asked. Do you know anything? I know a little, the man repeated after me. But let's not talk here. My name's Edward, by the way. And you? John. Edward headed down a narrow path leading into the woods. I left my car on the roadside and hurried after him. I felt both scared and strangely calm at the same time. Yes, there were no people, but I'd met a person, and he'd met others. So not everyone was gone? At last, we reached a small house standing in the middle of a clearing. Come in, John. I stepped onto the porch and opened the door, but immediately stumbled backward and nearly fell to the ground. Easy, easy, Edward encouraged me. Come in, just don't break anything. Instead of a typical bungalow, I walked into something that looked more like a laboratory. Glass flasks, computers, charts. The whole room was cluttered with equipment. I couldn't believe Edward was the one working with all this. He seemed far too simple on the outside. I carefully made my way between the tables with computers on them and saw a kitchen, a real kitchen, a table with some bread on it, a pitcher of water, and so on. Edward followed me and invited me to sit. So John, no thoughts? Edward began, sitting across from me. I shook my head. Of course, how would any of you know? You didn't believe me. Edward shook his head again. Thought I was an idiot, fired me, but turns out I was right, wasn't I? I nodded. Well then, John, listen to me and believe every word. If you don't, you can just walk away, go your own way, I won't stop you. Anyway, you're young, you probably play computer games, right? Obviously. So first you create little people, yeah? They go to work, talk, have kids. What was it called again? Sims, I prompted. Ah, right, Sims. I don't play myself, I just heard about it. So you're playing, and then you get sick of all of them. Everyone you created. What do? You delete everything and start over. But those little people don't understand that. They don't even know you exist. See what I'm getting at? I understood where Edward was heading, but my mind refused to accept it. You're saying we're in a simulation? I asked uncertainly. Welcome to reality, he smiled. Someone out there has gotten tired of us. He went into the laboratory and came back with some charts and diagrams. Here. This point is where the simulation intersects with reality. And here is where the break formed, see? And here? I sat staring at my cup, not really listening to Edward's explanations. I wanted to run as far away from this madman as possible, but something kept me there. There was some sense in what he said. Please, explain it more clearly. I'm not following, I asked. That's what I thought. He smiled. I'll explain it briefly and simply. My name is Edward Anderson, professor of the Department of Quantum Physics and Mechanics. In recent years, I studied parallel universes and other realities, and eventually discovered certain rifts connecting our world to some other space. Naturally, I didn't get any recognition, and soon I was fired. They thought I'd lost my mind, so I moved out here. And the people? What's actually happening? Look, going back to your, whatever you called it, Sims, imagine you got tired of everything, pressed a button, and that's it. No one left, start over. But here things are more complicated. Imagine you're a virus embedded in the game's file. And that's it. You can't just be deleted anymore. A picture was finally beginning to form in my mind. So those cases? Exactly, my friend. Those who took the people, that was them. The guests, the antivirus agents, cleaning out unwanted elements that can't just disappear on command. Think about it. Back in school, they told you about DNA. I'm no expert in biology, but what did they say? That it has something to do with genetics. Wrong. DNA is code. Your entry in the program. Yours, like mine, is damaged. That's why we didn't vanish like most people did all at once. So what do we do now? What happens next, I asked. No idea, he shrugged. I can explain the theory, but I wasn't prepared for any practical application. And who's sitting out there beyond the tiers in the system? I insisted. God knows, maybe people, maybe gods, I don't know. We sat in silence for several minutes. I stared at the glass of water, trying to make sense of everything. They'll be looking for us, I said. And when they find us? Exactly, Edward nodded. They'll find you and send you in for code correction, so they can delete you from the simulation like everyone else. Luckily, I have a solution. What kind of solution? DNA, the code, can be altered so it won't respond to any analysis. Just a few nuances. Edward stepped out and returned with a pill in his hand. Take it. Your code will begin restructuring. I stared at the pill for a moment, then swallowed it in one quick motion and washed it down with water. My stomach churned. My head crackled with pain. I looked at Edward questioningly. "That's how it's supposed to be, kid," he smiled. "I went through the same thing myself. You're lucky you found me. Doubt anyone else is working on this. Now get going. Nothing can threaten you anymore, and I've got work to do. Drop by if you need anything. Wait, what about the TV and radio? Not everyone's been removed from there yet. It's just a picture. They're reading scripts written long ago." I left the bungalow obediently, got into my car, and drove back to the city. My thoughts were a tangled mess, and I didn't even notice when I reached home. As I approached the entrance, I saw a group of 5 people standing near the door. They noticed me before I saw them, because they were already walking toward me by the time I lifted my head. I backed away, but it was too late. The men came within arm's reach and pulled out some kind of scanners. They shone red beams at me for a while, then suddenly turned around silently and walked off in an unknown direction. I believed Edward. I believed his words were true. About the simulation, about the pills. The antivirus agents were powerless and left me alone. The second confirmation came a few days later, when I looked out the window and saw the streets alive again. Except it wasn't the life I remembered, because before the streets were filled with people, not 2-meter-long worms slithering along the sidewalks. Anything can happen. Isabella and Chloe were typical teenage girls. After school, they spent all their free time together, watched scary movies, often slept over at each other's houses, and went clothes shopping together. They loved parties, loved hanging out with friends. In short, they lived ordinary lives, just like thousands of other girls. One night, Isabella and Chloe decided to have a girls' night. They planned to sneak out to a nightclub as soon as their parents went to bed. Isabella kissed her parents goodnight and went upstairs. When she was sure everyone was asleep, she took out her cell phone, called Chloe, and told her she would wait for her by the store down the street. Chloe said she understood and hung up. Isabella quietly opened her bedroom window, trying not to wake anyone. She climbed onto the windowsill, then onto the thick branch of the oak tree growing outside her window, and lowered herself down, a trick she had mastered since childhood. As she walked down the deserted street, she felt a strange sensation that someone was watching her. She looked around, but there was no one in sight. When she reached the store, she didn't see anyone. She pulled out her phone and called Chloe. "Okay, I'm at the store," she said. "Hurry up or I'm going home." "What's wrong?" Chloe asked. "I don't know," Isabella replied. "I just feel like someone's nearby." "Relax, you're just being paranoid," Chloe laughed. "I'll be there in 2 minutes." Isabella hung up, but still couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. 5 minutes later, Chloe arrived, and the girls headed to the nightclub. They were too young to be allowed inside, but the bouncers never asked for their IDs. They had a great time dancing and flirting with the guys. It was around 3 in the morning. Isabella was talking to a guy who looked about 10 years older than her. Suddenly, she felt her phone vibrate, a message from her ex-boyfriend, Anthony. She hadn't heard from him since they broke up a month ago. "Come out, I have a surprise for you." Confused, she looked around and saw that Chloe was busy talking to another guy. Without saying goodbye, Isabella stepped outside. She had taken only a few steps when another message arrived. "Meet me around the corner." The street was dimly lit and there was no one around. Isabella had a bad feeling again, but she decided to take a look around the corner anyway. Meanwhile, inside the club, Chloe was looking for her friend. She walked across the dance floor, even checked the bathrooms, but couldn't find Isabella. Then she received a message from her. "Meet me outside, hurry." When Chloe walked outside, she got another message. "I'm around the corner." Turning the corner, Chloe saw a horrifying sight. Isabella was hanging upside down from a street lamp. Shimmering Christmas lights were wrapped tightly around her ankles. Beneath her was a pool of blood. She was completely naked, and her body was covered with deep, ragged wounds on her stomach and chest. Chloe collapsed to the ground and started screaming hysterically. Several people near the club entrance heard her and rushed over. The police were called. Through tears, Chloe explained how she and Isabella had snuck out and gone to the nightclub. She tried to remember every guy they had flirted with on the dance floor. They asked if she suspected anyone, but Chloe couldn't think badly of anyone. During questioning, one of the officers held up a plastic evidence bag containing a blood-soaked envelope. "We found this in your friend's throat." "For Chloe," was written in large letters on the envelope. The officer opened it and read the letter. "Maybe a few girls had stayed in your beds. None of this would have happened. Don't roam around at night. Anything can happen. The officers caught Chloe when she fainted. She was taken to the hospital. The next day, her parents told her that Isabella's ex-boyfriend, Anthony, had been arrested on suspicion of murder, but he had an alibi and was released shortly after. He claimed that his phone had been stolen on the day of the murder. The killer of Isabella was never found. Everything slowly began to fade from memory. 2 years passed, and Chloe had almost managed to forget that terrible night. One late evening, Chloe called her boyfriend and asked him to meet her in the park. She headed toward the park and suddenly felt uneasy, as if someone was watching her. She reached the park entrance, but the strange feeling wouldn't go away. Her phone buzzed. A message from her boyfriend. "I'm almost there, baby, love you." Chloe felt relieved. All she had to do was walk past the store. The park was right behind it. She rounded the corner of the building when suddenly she heard a noise behind her. Without turning around, she took off running. Chloe's boyfriend waited for her in the park for a long time. Finally, he received a message from her. "Walk forward and you'll see me." He walked forward and saw Chloe's body hanging from a tree by the side of the road. Christmas lights were wrapped around her ankles. She was completely naked, and her entire body was covered in blood. He called the police. They questioned him all night. When he finally returned home at dawn, he found a letter waiting on his doorstep. It was spattered with drops of blood. The letter read, "Don't roam around at night. Anything can happen." I wish I could say that the killer of Isabella and Chloe was found, but that's not the case. People eventually forgot. At the time, the murders received widespread attention, but because there were no clues, the killer was never caught. Life simply went on. You might wonder how I know so much about it. Well, I'd rather not get into the details considering the investigation, at least officially, is still ongoing. I'll just repeat my favorite phrase: don't roam around at night. Anything can happen.